Okay, right. Thanks, everyone, for joining this masterclass. We're going to talk about risk assessments for general product safety products, and the trigger, the reason for this masterclass is the replacement of the current General Product Safety Directive with the General Product Safety Regulation, and this replacement will take place on the 13th of December, by the end of this year. Yeah, the masterclass is a cooperation between three companies. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. First one is Instructive, 24-hour AR, and the third company is the Swedish company compliance agency Satisfy. I want to kick off with an example, actually with an experience I had myself with a general product safety product. It's actually the first time I had to deal with such a product, but back then, and I'm talking about 25 years ago, I think I never heard of a general product safety product. So I was still at university, doing my internship at a Dutch manufacturing company that mainly produced table tennis tables, table football tables, etc. I was studying industrial design engineering back then, and the assignment I got from the company is to improve the safety of table tennis tables. I don't know exactly when this accident happened. Must have been in the late 90s or around the turn of the century. But what happened is that a young girl was playing between the two folded table tennis tops when one top fell down. She got entrapped with her head and unfortunately did not survive. This accident was the main trigger to revise the previous standard, European standard for table tennis tables. And when I was preparing this masterclass, I was curious. I thought, oh, let's have a look at this standard again after 25 years. And this change on which I was working 25 years ago is still in there. So this part and basically says that table tennis tables with a gap of over 110 millimeters need to have certain the standard gives requirements for the what's called the locking devices and the unlocking actions for those type of tabletops. Yeah, so that's first experience of with a general product safety product. I think when back then it would have been required to conduct a risk assessment for these types of products, the accident could have been prevented. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during this masterclass, because this is the main topic of this masterclass. A little bit of backstory about myself. Dutch of origin, raised in a machinery factory, was always mass production was always part of daily life. When studying industrial design engineering. The director at Instructive, a company that creates clear user manuals that comply with legal requirements. Also the co-founder of 24-hour AR, a company that provides authorized representative services. Part of the European Advisory Board for Legislation and Standards at TCOM. And we are responsible, amongst others, for the major change in the machinery regulation, which will allow digital user instructions. Besides that, I'm a trainer at the Dutch Standardization Institute. Business-wise, we work really closely with the Swedish company Satisfy, with all our customers' compliance challenges. And what Satisfy does is they conduct the actual risk assessments, identify the requirements of certain products, or which direct supply regulations apply, standards apply, support on the testing, etc. So that's the relationship with Satisfy. Yeah, that's about it. A few housekeeping tasks before we start. As you saw on the first slide, this masterclass was intended to be presented together with Robert Johnson. Robert is the director at Satisfy and is the other co-founder of 24-Hour AR. So we are business partners. Due to the upcoming deadline of the General Product Safety Regulation, we decided to move this masterclass forward. So it could take place before the summer holidays instead of September when it was originally planned. But unfortunately, during Robert's holidays. So I am taking over from him. I must say I'm slightly, I have been quite nervous all day. Because I know everything about user manuals. I know a lot about CE mark and compliance, etc. But risk assessments, I wouldn't consider it as my main area of expertise. I prepared well. I prepared the presentation, so I hope I can. I'm quite confident that I can answer most of the questions. If not, they will be answered after the webinar, and you will receive them together with the recording. What else? It's the first time that we do this webinar. In the description, it said that it will take for about 2 hours. I think the presentation that I will do will last for about an hour, and then we have a Q&A session to go through any of your questions. So it can be that we need a little bit less than 2 hours, but just wanted to be, thought it would be better to be safe than sorry, and that's why I ask you to keep 2 hours available in your precious schedule. All right. With Instructive, we do have to deal with risk assessment. So we create user manuals. We help creating companies their user manuals, and a user manual typically includes safety instructions. Safety instructions warn against a product's hazards, and these hazards are assessed through a risk assessment and the risk reducing measures that are a result of the risk assessment. So in other words, when we write a manual for our customers, we need a risk assessment. So we know for sure that all the risks or the risk for which safety instructions need to be supplied are included in the user manual, which means when we start a new project and we request the risk assessment from our customer and they don't have it, and we basically say, okay, well, then we strongly advise you to conduct a risk assessment before we start working on the manual, or at least we can start, but we need it at a certain point. So that's how we are involved with risk assessments at Instructive. How will this masterclass look like? We'll start with an introduction. Then we'll have a look at an introduction of the General Product Safety Regulation, I mean. Then we'll have a look at the technical file requirements, the new things that we can find in the General Product Safety Regulation. And one of them, and that's the main topic of this masterclass, is the risk assessment. So we'll dive into the risk assessment and discuss in detail what the General Product Safety Regulation requires, tells about this. Accordingly, I'll introduce to you our risk assessment template, so which we finalize basically together with Satisfy to make sure that it's usable. So everyone who's joining this masterclass will get a copy of the template after the masterclass. I'll show you how you can fill out the template by means of a case study. And almost at the end, as a bonus, I want to show you how you can use AI to draft the safety messages from your risk assessment. Then we maybe will have a break, and so after an hour, and then we'll go to the Q&A. But I prefer to wait with any of your questions until after the presentation, because maybe some things may be discussed later, and otherwise it may get to become too chaotic. So we have plenty of time after the presentation. Okay, Pete, I'm going to unmute you or ask you to unmute. Yeah. All right. So what is, first of all, what is new in the General Product Safety Regulation? As I said, it will come into force on December the 13th, 2024, and it will replace the current General Product Safety Directive. The aim of the new regulation, and also the aim of the current General Product Safety Directive, is to guarantee the safety of consumer goods. And I highlighted consumer goods because it does not apply to professional products, machinery, etc. Consumer goods that are sold both offline and online via any sales channel. The General Product Safety Regulation applies to products that are placed or made available on the market insofar as there are no specific provisions with the same objective under union law which regulate the safety of the products concerned. What this means is that it's basically a catch-all directive. So if there's no other European legislation or standard that regulates the product, then the consumer product and basically the General Product Safety Regulation or Directive applies, which basically says the product needs to be safe. What this means for the risks of a product is that when there are any risks with a product that are not yet covered by other legislation, the General Product Safety Directive or Regulation applies as well. And it requires that the product shall be safe and risks shall be mitigated. This also means that if a product is covered under certain European legislation or when there are certain standards, but the standard or the regular legislation does not cover all of the risks, or does not have a solution, a requirement to mitigate all the risks, then still the General Product Safety Regulation applies to cover, to mitigate, reduce the residual risks of the product. When we have a look at the General Product Safety Regulation, we see quite a few changes, and I want to go through the main changes of the new regulation. So first of all, for each product covered by the regulation, there has to be a responsible economic operator in the EU. And the economic operator is a legal term. You'll find it through most of the European legislation, and can be different kinds of persons. So it can be either the manufacturer, can be the importer, can be an authorized representative who is appointed by the non-European manufacturer, can sometimes also be appointed by the European manufacturer, or a fulfillment service provider, and is entrusted with tasks relating to the safety of the product. So this is a complete new thing in the General Product Safety Regulation, and its aim for this new requirement is to fill a giant gap. With regulation EU 2019-1020 on market surveillance, having an EU-based economic operator, such as a manufacturer, importer, authorized representative, etc., became already mandatory for most of the CE marked products. Germany was a little bit stricter, always had a little bit stricter. So in the German Produktsicherheitsgesetz, there already was a requirement for basically all products to have a German or an EU-based contact person, economic operator. And what basically now happens is that for all general product safety products, having an EU-based economic operator becomes mandatory. The second big change in the new regulation, and that's the main topic of today, is that an internal risk analysis shall be carried out and the relevant technical documentation shall be drawn up. At the end of this masterclass, I'm quite interested in knowing what your other concerns are or questions are regarding the new General Product Safety Regulation, because that will help us to decide if we do a follow-up masterclass on another topic. So it could be on economic operators, could be on drafting technical documentation. So feel free to bring in your questions at the end. The third thing that we find in the General Product Safety Regulation is that there will be product safety obligations for online marketplaces, such as Etsy, Amazon, etc., bol.com in the Netherlands and Belgium. The fourth big change is that there is an enhancement of rules on product recalls. And then again, I want to emphasize it, the importance of risk assessment for non-CE marked consumer products. So what does this mean for you as a brand owner, as a manufacturer, or as a company marketing products on the European market? To answer that question, I want to define what a General Product Safety Regulation product is first. According to the definition, it is a product that is intended to be used by consumers, and additionally, a professional product that still is likely to be used by consumers. So when you can reasonably expect that a product is used by consumers, even though it's a professional product, the General Product Safety Regulation still applies. Which basically means that both CE marked products and also non-CE marked products can fall under this classification. And the General Product Safety Regulation is relevant for that product applies to that product. Let's have a look at the new requirements on the technical file according to the new regulation. First of all, we see that the new regulation mentions emphasizes the importance of the product description. So it mentions the product description and says it should ensure that the product description is mentioned to ensure that one can assess the safety of the product properly. So without a proper product description, you also can't assess a product properly. So here you find this requirement before placing their products on the market. Manufacturers shall carry out an internal risk analysis and draw up technical documentation containing at least a general description of the product and its essential characteristics relevant for assessing its safety. And this, of course, automatically means that the description will differ from different products depending on the complexity of it. So the more complex a product is, the more detailed the description will be. The easier it also will be, and the more maybe not the most easiest, but the better, the more accurate you can conduct the risk assessment as well. The second thing we see in the technical documentation requirements is that the risk analysis is mentioned in the regulation as a requirement that the manufacturer shall fulfill. So it's the duty of the manufacturer before placing the product on the market to conduct a risk analysis. You find it here in this section of the new regulation. And what really stood out to us is that normally we speak of a risk assessment instead of a risk analysis. So why is the General Product Safety Regulation using both terms? So you both see the wording risk analysis and the wording risk assessment in the regulation. We note it resulted in some internal discussions. And eventually we went back to the ISO 12100 standard, which is a standard for risk assessment for machinery. And when you look in into the definition of a risk assessment in that standard, it is defined as a combination of risk analysis. So that's the first part that we also see in the new General Product Safety Regulation, an identification of hazards, and a risk estimation, which is analyzing the risk severity and the possibility of occurrence, and eventually risk evaluation, and then risk reduction. So when the risk is not acceptable, there's a need for a risk reduction, which is reducing or removing the risk entirely. So why would a risk analysis be enough for general product safety products? That's basically the main question that we asked ourselves. And what we see in the General Product Safety Regulation is that the technical documentation should be based on an internal risk analysis carried out by the manufacturer. And in the case of more complex products or products presenting possible risks, in those cases, the evaluation of those risks and the technical means adopted to reduce or eliminate those risks are required. We'll have a look at this. It might be a little bit complicated, but we'll look at this when we open the template in a bit. Meaning you always have to do the risk analysis, but only when you see that when you identify a risk, then you need to do the other parts, which are risk estimation, evaluation, and determine how to reduce the risks of the product. All right, let's have a look at an example, an old example that used in other presentations as well. So what we see here are basically two main product parts that are connected by two bolts, so 4 parts in total. And when we would create an assembly instruction for this part, it would, for these parts, to connect them, it would look like this. So quite straightforward, 4 steps to mount the parts. Place part 1 flat side up on the mounting surface, hold part 2 at the correct height against part 1, and tighten bolts 3 and 4 to secure the assembly. But when we change one thing, and that's the weight of the parts, so now they are 20 kilograms, the instructions will look slightly different, and that's because the risks involved have changed quite a bit. So what are the dangers and what are the dangers or dangerous situations right now? And these can only be conducted by the means of a risk assessment. So, for example, by changing the weight, we're talking about some mechanical hazards, so pinching, stability, losing stability could be two risks, and some ergonomic hazards such as excessive exertion. When we would create the user instructions for these two parts weighing 2 kilograms, they could look something like this. So they have to include many safety warnings to warn for all kinds of risks that can occur. But this is not the right way of doing it, because the user instructions may never compensate a defect in the design, and you can decrease the risks of these products by conducting a risk assessment. So this is just an example of how a risk assessment could look like, or how the hazard groups are assessed. And when you do a risk assessment properly, you will find some solutions to mitigate the risk. And there are and that comes from the ISO 12100 standard for risk assessment for machinery, that you can apply it to all kinds of risk assessment methods. So that standard basically says there are 3 ways of reducing the risk of a product or of machinery. When you find a risk and it's not acceptable, then the first thing that you can do is improving the design. If there are still risks, the second thing you can do is by providing safety measures. And then at the end, when there are still residual risks, then you have the opportunity to provide information with the product, such as user instructions, but also marking or warnings on the machinery itself. So what happened here, basically, as a result of the risk assessment, the engineer found that by changing the design, he was able to mitigate a few risks. So the pinching, stability, even the excessive exertion have been mitigated by means of a risk assessment. So that's the theory behind a risk assessment. Right now, I want to have a look at a real world, a very, very recent example. And that is the foldable chair incident, which happened just a few months ago in Sweden. A typical Swedish design chair, I would say, or maybe not. So the case is around this chair. It's about a recall published in the Swedish consumer on the Swedish Consumer Agency website. And what happened is that this sun chair had cut off the tip of the finger of a child. Let's have a look. No, I can't open it here. This is an exact, well, translation from the website of the Swedish agency. Just a few sentences, so we can go through it. The company is recalling the chairs in 4 different designs for children and adults. The construction is dangerous and can injure the person sitting in the chair. A child has had the top of a finger cut off after a chair collapse. The chairs lack a safety lock, which means that the wooden rod that regulates the seat height can jump out of the recess in the frame. Then the chair folds up accidentally. The person sitting on the chair risks having their fingers crushed or pinched between the wooden parts of the chair. So that's the exact text from the recall. This is the chair again. So what you see here, these gaps here are not deep enough, meaning when you sit down, this part falls off, and here this part basically becomes a scissor. General product safety products, and yeah, this could have be prevented could have been prevented by a proper risk assessment. So the lack of a proper risk assessment may have contributed to the accident. When you don't do a risk assessment, the problem basically is that you don't know that a risk exists, and then you won't handle after it. If a risk assessment had been conducted, the accident with the cut-off finger would not have happened. Okay, next I'm going to explain the method that we use to draft the templates, and afterwards we're going to dive into the templates. And well, as I said, there is a standard for risk assessment for machinery, but that is developed for machinery and does not always apply to more simple products or less complex products. So we came up with our own method to assess the risks of general product safety products. Basically, there are no really requirements of which methods to use to comply with the risk analysis requirements in the General Product Safety Regulation. And that's why we created our own method, and we use basically 2 legislative tools we have, and that's a standard, the ISO 10377, and implementing decision EU 2019/417. The implementing decision is a decision that contains guidelines on general product safety within the EU, and the standard is provides guidelines for suppliers, and is basically an international standard that explains the concepts of risk analysis and risk reduction. So a more lighter version of the ISO 12100, I would say. The first thing that this standard, or basically the method that we drafted as a result of the decision and the standard says is that you should start with filling out all the product information and include a picture of the product in your documentation, risk assessment documentation. Next, you identify the hazards. And you can use the examples from our template as references and document the hazards. Then you have a look at existing measures that already have taken to reduce a certain hazard, if there are any. Accordingly, you have to estimate the risk and determine the severity and probability that a risk occurs and document that in the risk assessment. Then you can determine the risk tolerance. So basically decide if the risk is acceptable, yes or no. In step 6, you do the risk mitigation. So if a risk is not acceptable, then you plan and document the mitigation measures. Then a re-evaluation follows. So basically you assess the new risk level after the mitigation. Then you document the remaining risks and the necessary warnings or safety instructions to be included in the user manual. And then you have a final evaluation. So you confirm that the residual risks are acceptable. And accordingly, the completion, you implement all the mitigation measures according to the plan. So let's have a look at the risk assessment template and do a step-by-step walkthrough. Let me see if I can open it here. I have it on my computer. So this is the template that you will receive after this masterclass. And you have the Zoom screen in front of me, so I have to drag it. I can drag it to the next screen. Perfect. Right, so when you open the risk assessment, you see several tabs here. It starts with the information tab, so that was the first step of all those steps that we just discussed. Then there are several other tabs. I'll go through them in a bit. We start here at the information tab. So you can fill out here the name of the responsible economic operator in the EU, the role of the operator. Then you can fill out all traceability information, basically. So the product name, the part number, model number, type number, serial number, etc. A description of the product, the country of origin, the intended user, also the non-intended user. So is it a consumer? Could also be, in some cases, the installer, could be an operator, could be all kinds of users. If any vulnerable consumers will use the product, for example, children or elderly, the intended use of the product, so for what is the product intended, but also the reasonably foreseeable misuse. So what can you think of the product could be misused for? So that's a typical cat in the microwave story. Here you can add where it is used, the product, so it's indoor, outdoor, on the water, etc. The expected lifetime of the product, for example, is the technical lifetime of the product 5 years, 10 years, etc. Then you can go through the different phases of the product's lifespan. And that's a product often is bought somewhere, either online or in a store, then it's being transported. It can be transported to the store as well, but then the user gets it, transports it to home, starts using it, maybe assembling it, cleaning it, etc. And describing those different life stages helps you to assess the risks of a product. So each life stage comes with its own risks, hazards that we need to assess, including the aftermarket. So is there any repair, service, or maintenance involved until the waste or disposal stage? Then a few other things to consider, which come from the new General Product Safety Regulation, which is, for example, you have to consider the packaging. Does the packaging, for example, have any play value? Because if so, then the Toy Safety Directive could apply. You also have to consider the accessories of the product and any collateral material attached documents that come with the product. Here's a tab with where you can record or note all the meetings that you had internally, for example, the name, the role, the company, the date of the meeting. And then the main part of the risk assessment is where you basically assess all the product's risks. So there's a column for the date, here's a column for the stage, so the transport, use, aftermarket, etc., that you can fill out. Then we have here the hazard groups, and we created this drop-down menu so you can assess the risks per hazard group. So is it a physical risk? Is it the risk with potential energy, kinetic energy, electrical risk, thermal risks, radiation, etc.? Then here you describe the actual hazard that occurs, the exposed person, so the end user, child. Then a description of the injury scenario and the injury itself, the measures that already have been taken the severity of injury, the probability of the injury, the risk, and then here finally you say, okay, is this risk tolerable? And if no, further measures are needed. We did talk about the risk analysis and the risk assessment. So according to the General Product Safety Regulation, you are obliged to conduct a risk analysis, which basically means you have to go through the different stages of the product's lifespan. You have to see if there are any hazards, but only if a risk or hazard is likely to occur, then you are obliged to conduct the rest of the risk assessment. So this part is the risk assessment. The part before is the risk analysis. I hope that makes sense. Right, then we continue here. So is the risk tolerable? If no further measures are needed, then we decide how and with which measures the risk shall be mitigated. So it can still be an improvement on the design, can be by means of providing safety instructions. Again, the safety instructions should not be used to compensate a failure in the design of the product. Then you can note down the person responsible for the measure, and then again we start quantifying the measures. So what is the new severity? What's the new probability? The new resulting risks? And are these acceptable? And do we need to mitigate the risk, for example, by providing warnings? The third tab is meant to include some pictures, so you can include pictures of the product and indicate where the risks are. Here are some description included taken from the standards that describe the methods. So if you need more information, here are some hazard example groups. Here you see burning, cold surfaces, etc. It helps you to identify the risks that can occur. And here are some examples of the different severity levels. So for example, here you see the type of injury and then different levels of severity. So here it's a superficial cut. There's an external deep cut. Optic nerve has been hit. And this is the most severe cut. And also these help you to assess the risks and to determine if eventually a risk reduction is required. Okay. Yeah, I think this is what we did, right? Yep. Then we can have a look at the example, and if you want, we can send that as well. So this is basically the example that we spoke about of the foldable chair. We filled the templates in with all the details, the name, etc., model number, country of origin, the expected lifetime. It's used for outdoor. Then the different lifespans of the product. So first of all, it's delivered to the distributor, picked up by the consumer. Then it's unpacked, unfolded. The consumer sits in, stands up, adjusts the lean. Product is folded together and stored away. So that's basically all what happens with the product. Then no aftermarket or service, and then it's recycled according to national waste legislation. The packaging has no play value. There are no accessories supplied with the product and no hazards with the attached document. Here we've drafted the meetings that we had, and then the most important part, the assessment of the product risks. So the measures that already were taken in place in the case of the chair was the folding lock. So there was already an existing folding lock mechanism. There also were some warning labels, very basic warnings on the product packaging. You can ask yourself, is that sufficient on the product packaging? I think the general opinion is that it's not, but that's a different discussion. Then we have identified that the severity of the injury is major. So a finger was, I think, was cut off, right? The probability of injury during the lifetime of the product is more than 1 out of 1,000. The resulting risk is serious. And is the risk tolerable? No, absolutely not. So we decided, we agreed that 1 out of 1,000 with this risk is definitely not tolerable. Here is the description of the measures that already were taken in place. These are examples of proposed improvements of the product. So add a robust locking mechanism to prevent accidental collapse, provide clear and prominent warning labels on product and in the user manual, a redesign of the folding mechanism to eliminate pinch points. Then the new severity of injury is major, but because the new probability of the injury changed, 1 out of 1 million, the new resulting risk is rather low. So here we decided that it would be sufficient to warn the users about keeping fingers away from the folding mechanism, even with the improvements on the safety measures. With those warnings and design improvements, the new risk is acceptable. I think the last thing that would be good to discuss here is that we included some pictures with where indicating where the hazardous areas are. right. Then one of the last things that I would like to show you is, and it's quite a recent thing that we did, because we have to deal with risk assessments before. With at Instructive, we create user instructions, and we need a risk assessment to make sure that we include all the most important safety instructions in the user manual. And we did a research because we've collected hundreds of risk assessments over the years, and our question was: is it possible to use AI, specifically ChatGPT, to analyze a risk assessment and to distill the safety instructions out of it? I hope you can. Not really needed, I think, to hear it. So I'll give a little bit explanation with this video. Right, so this is our research. So we wanted to find out if we can use ChatGPT to and then use a risk assessment. So we uploaded an existing risk assessment we had, and I have to say that it took some time to find a really good risk assessment. This one was a good one. And what this one does, it indicates with the letters OI operating instructions that a certain risk reducing measure should be taken in the operating instruction. So this is the risk reducing measure. In the manual, it should be stated that the environment should be kept clean. So we uploaded the risk assessments, and I copied the prompt. Oh, and which is in the attached risk assessment, the risks that must be mitigated in the user manual are indicated with OI. Maybe it wasn't even necessary to say this, but I preferred like a step-by-step approach. Can you first identify all OI sections? So ChatGPT went through the risk assessments, identified all the risks, quite a few. And this is far from how we would like to see it in the user manual, of course. So we needed a couple of more actions, prompts to get to safety instructions. And if you want, we can share this as well with you. So it's rather so we have an idea how the perfect safety instructions should look like. And that's what this prompt says. And first of all, it's not always possible to create the perfect safety instruction. It's basically only possible when the hazard group, for example, mechanical or thermal or ergonomical, is really clear, because then you can say this is the hazard, this is what you need, what occurs when you don't avoid the hazard, and this is what you need to do to avoid the hazard. So we basically taught ChatGPT what we think a good safety instruction would be, also gave a good example with it, and refer to certain standards. So this is all part of the prompt that we gave to ChatGPT. So this is looking much better, except for the heading, so machine 9.5, etc. That's not what we would need in the the user manual. So we asked ChatGPT to remove all the headings. And then we have safety instructions that could be included. And of course, you need to go through it. Don't copy paste it one-on-one to review everything before putting it in the manual. But it's a huge time saver. Right, we're getting to the end of this, the first part of this masterclass. So I just want to summarize what you will receive after this meeting. So first of all, the risk assessment templates. So two Microsoft Excel templates that you can use yourself to conduct the risk assessment. So first template, one template and one example template filled out with the foldable chair. You will receive the recording of this masterclass, and I included a couple of links in this presentation. So you will receive the presentation as well, and the links to the most important European legislation. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation, stop the recording as well. Maybe I'll continue the recording and I'll stop it. Yeah. All right. I see a few more people joined meanwhile. Yeah, then we're getting to the second part of the masterclass, the Q&A. So if there's someone with, if there are some questions, please feel free to ask them. Was everything clear? Chris, you're not muted.
Hi, Ferry. Yeah, I thought that was pretty clear, to be honest with you. Obviously, my products are clothing, so sometimes it's trying to understand how clothing in mechanical products kind of, obviously, it's a slightly different hazards perhaps between mechanical items with moving parts and clothing. So yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around how some of this is going to apply to my products. Just one question. When you did the chair analysis, you came up with a risk probability before. I think it was 1 in 1,000. Then after you'd made a modification, it was 1 in 1 million. But how do you come up with how is there a methodology to create the come up with the probability of a risk?
Yeah, good question. I must say that Robert did do this this risk evaluation, this part, but definitely he should have used a methodology. Let me quickly check if I can find that here. Yeah, I'll share my screen again. So when you go into the template, into the method description, you see this table here, and that's a methodology described in the standard that we used. And it has to do with the severity of the injury. So if there's a serious risk, high risk, medium risk, low risk, etc. So this table is used to determine that number.
Okay, but would it be the manufacturer who kind of decides which kind of number you'd be on?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what you'll see is that ask any person to conduct a risk assessment, ask 10 persons to conduct a risk assessment, and you'll get 10 different outcomes. So in the end, it's the responsibility of the manufacturer to conduct one, and the company is in the end responsible for placing safe products on the market.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is quite, yeah, it's not always it depends on the person who's conducting the risk assessment. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do have one.
Ben?
I'm also more in the closing area. And I mean, most of the items are pretty straightforward. Talking about a hat or a pair of gloves, and I'm not talking about PPE, but consumer products.
Yeah.
How deep do you have to go? I mean, there's a lot of things you could swallow a cloth or something, But in basic, we are always concerned with the kind of REACH compliance of this.
Yeah.
And obviously having metal parts on it, no sharp objects. But that's about the things we're looking into.
Yeah.
Is this enough?
That looks enough. So you're dealing with REACH compliance. You still can say that if REACH doesn't cover everything, and REACH only covers the chemicals used in the clothing. So you definitely must say, all right, not everything is covered. So you have to conduct a risk assessment. So when, as you said, like small parts can fall off, that could be a risk that you typically would assess in the risk assessment. In the risk assessment. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes, but I still have to do the whole risk assessment.
You have to, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Barry, can I ask a question, please?
Sure, yeah, Ibrahim.
Ibrahim from Spekak, yeah. So there was a little bit confusion about the B2B product and B2C product. So if I'm not sure that my product is going to be a consumer product, how I'm going to decide that, and is it mandatory to in the product description to say my product is research product and not designed for consumer?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What often is done is that, and I always call it the heart of the user manual, and it's mentioned on tab 1 of the template as well. That is that you start with describing the intended use of the product. So this product is intended to be used as a device to, or as a product to, and then you describe its main functionality. And often you add things to it like this product is only intended to be used in household environments, or for industrial use when it's an industrial product. It's not intended to be used in explosive environments. So you describe the limits of the use of the product. So that's always how a risk assessment starts. And by describing that properly, you limit your liability, you limit the amount of work you need to put in your user manual. When for more complex products, you limit the amount of spare parts that you need to provide within the technical lifespan of the product. For example, when you say in your risk assessment the product has a lifespan of 10 years, then it's your duty to make sure that the product can be used safely for 10 years, and that spare parts that can are subject to wear within those 10 years are supplied. Long story, but going back to your question, yeah, you should determine for what the product is used. And what we've often seen, well, a real case, example is that we had products, inflatable airbags, and our customer said, the market authorities reached out to us saying that we are not allowed to sell these products anymore because they fall under the Toy Safety Directive. But we think that they do not. So we just had a quick look actually at at the company and went to the website, and we saw that in their marketing material they were using children playing with the airbeds. So then you're implying that the product can be used by children. Then the children can use it to play. So it has a play function, and then the Toy Safety Directive applies. So you have to be really careful. You have a product, you sell a product on the market. It's intended to be used in a certain way by certain people within a certain environment, within a certain period of time. And it's your duty to describe that properly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Was it helpful? Is it helpful to have such a template? Do you know what to do right now? Does it help in your process? Are there any other struggles that you or hurdles that you need to take?
I think the template is really useful. I have a very similar template, but far smaller, I must admit. Yes, but with the new safety director regulation coming, I think it's important just to document that you've done something.
Yeah. Yeah, you're dealing with REACH, as you said, Sven.
I'm mainly dealing with PPE.
Okay.
So risk assessment not really new to me, but since it's coming to all consumer products, we have to find a way to simplify the process a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have 500 different T-shirt models in the range.
Yeah, then it can be a huge amount of work, right? And especially, and that's the requirement in the General Product Safety Regulation, but it specifically says that the description, mentioning the description in the technical documentation is important. So by, each time you have a different product, it means that you have a different description, means that you need a different risk assessment for that product.
But can I draw up one risk assessment for a group of products?
When it depends on the type of product, but you're in apparel. Then when the risks are similar of the products, then it would be possible. It even happens for more complicated products, such as automatic sliding doors, for example, with different different measurements. Then they say in the risk assessment, this risk assessment or this declaration of performance applies to products with a gap of between 3 and 5 meters, for example, with obviously different risks. But in your case, I would say when there are like small parts that can fall off, etc., or when different chemical components are used, for example, you have a different manufacturer possibly using different chemicals. You don't need to assess all the products. I'm not a REACH expert, by the way, but you don't need to assess the products on all 211 registered chemicals, but you can ask your supplier to declare that the product does not contain a chemical that is in the REACH database.
Oh yeah, that's what we do, and we also do spot checks, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Thank you. Dorothy, you popped in later. Any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you. My only question was the same as the 1 in 1,000, which is very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? So if any question pops up, feel free to send me an email. You can send it to the info@24hourAR.com email address. I think most of you have those details. My personal email address there, and my instructive contacts. I think most of you have my email address as well. Shoot it to the info, then it will get to me as well. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I do have some time left, so I'll use that time to collect everything, to prepare the recording, and send all the material to you directly afterwards. So you'll hear from us soon. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for joining. And if you have any ideas about for an upcoming next webinar that would be interesting, a topic related to the General Product Safety Regulation that we possibly can discuss, let me know. Put it in the chat or let me know. Shoot an email. Also, if there are any other compliance issues that you're struggling with, the upcoming machinery regulation, for example, the draft for the toy safety regulation that has been published, would be interested to know what you're dealing with, what your main challenges are during the day. If anyone wants to share something about that now, feel free to do so. If not, shoot me an email. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.